So I recently played Bendy, covering both games in a story explained video, but it wasn't the ink demon who caught the ire of my attention. Instead, it was the man with his hands surrounding the dark world, the art, the creation process. This man, let me tell you something, this man made me wonder what it is about artists that just makes them so messed up. I'm not an artist, but I would think that creativity and passion is life-giving, right? You breathe life into the world and it kind of breathes back into you. But Joey Drew, while I think he began with creativity, over time it corrupted into obsession. What he made became a vehicle for control and permanence. What he might have actually loved got hijacked by fear and insecurity. But why and how? The mind of his archetype is what I found to be interesting. Why do characters like Joey think the things they think and do the things that they do? And why do they make tantalizing antagonists? That's what I want to look into today. So if you like content that mixes psychology and gaming, the like button helps this video find more individuals such as yourself. Now since you're still here, welcome
to the psychology of Joey Drew in Bendy.
Joey Drew was once a dreamer. He built a studio on the promise of joy, wonder, and creativity. Face value, he looked like a man who wanted to make people smile. But behind the mask, his real obsession was with himself. You see, he wanted more than success. He wanted to live forever. He wanted his name to echo throughout time long after he was gone. He wanted immortality through legacy. And psychologists like Heinz Kohut describe this type of hunger as narcissistic grandiosity. It ironically comes from a fragile self-image that can never be satisfied. Instead of nurturing relationships, lifting others up, or building stability, people like Joey Drew chase admiration and legacy as if their inflated sense of self will fill a void. That drive led him to utilize the ink machine to create his own world as a way of playing God. And his creations like Bendy, Boris, and Alice were never just characters to him, they were simply vessels for his ego. But that's not all. Because it gets even more profound and pronounced when we look at Ernest Becker's theory of the denial of death. Think about Joey's deepest fear: dying, mortality, being forgotten. Becker argued that most human beings try to escape the reality of being human by leaving behind something permanent. Some do it through children, some do it through achievements, some through art or even books. Joey chose his cartoons. He could not accept the thought of being not even an echo of a memory. So he poured his life into bending ink into flesh, so to speak. And while he was triumphant, no matter what you do, you will be forgotten eventually. Even your great-grandchildren will barely know who you are. And your great-great-grandkids, well, they're probably never even going to know your name, what you look like, your life struggles, what your life aspirations or hobbies were. You'll die a second death, just like everyone else. The people around Joey suffered for this obsession to be more than just a mere man. He wanted his legacy to permeate into the future. But Joey Drew's vision demanded more than he could ever provide on his own. So he relied on the people around him. Employees described him as manipulative, controlling, and willing to sacrifice others for his vision. He would even cultivate an environment where he just flat out would tell everyone to simply trust and be loyal to him. For the longest time, he was treating people as tools rather than individuals. How arrogant one must be to see others as only a means to an end. However, Joey exploited both workers and his creations alike, draining every single thing that he could from them for the sake of his legacy. The studio became an environment where workers were pushed to exhaustion because their value was measured by what they could produce for his empire, and he would constantly demand more and more from everyone. The atmosphere of fear and manipulation spread across the studio. Creativity, which was supposed to be the heart of the corporation, was replaced by anxiety and distrust. Employees became cautious and withdrawn because they knew their efforts were being consumed rather than appreciated. Even Henry, his old friend, with whom he started the entire studio together, would suffer at the hands of Joey Drew. To punish and get revenge on Henry, who left because he loved his wife, the same way I love my wife, and wanted to live a better life with her, Joey pulled a black mirror and imprisoned a sliver of Henry's soul within the ink realm. However, this pattern of exploitation is not unique to him as a character, because when we take a look in the real world, Research in organizational psychology shows how narcissistic leaders often create environments of instability and burnout. Sound familiar? They drive productivity in the short term, but the long-term effect is collapse, both for the workers and the leader himself. Joey's company followed this exact same path, with his control gradually undermining the very foundation of the studio he wanted to preserve. He was his own downfall. So, why do individuals like Joey act and think like this? Well, let's think about how it plays out in the real world, because at one point or another, we have all encountered figures like Joey in our lives. A boss who pushes workers until they burn out, a parent who lives through their child's achievements, or a leader who demands loyalty while giving absolutely nothing back. In each case, the constant drive for recognition outweighs empathy. But you know what? People in positions of power always show their true colors. They always show who they really are to the core when it comes to how they treat people who work for them. For these self-inflated, egotistical bosses who belittle and use others, well, the people around them stop being individuals and instead become mirrors for that person's insecurity. Because at the end of the day, they're basically saying that they feel, and when I say they, I mean the bosses feel so fragile that they feel the need to exert their dominance. And of course, this isn't a one-size-fits-all, but as with anything in psychology, feel free to put the shoes on and tie them up. And again, we've all had a quote-unquote fearless leader who puts on a show and inspires in the short term with their vision and charisma, but then they also have a vehement refusal to tolerate criticism or share credit. These kinds of people always talk about what they did and how much, but never what everybody did. It's all me and not we. For the people under them, the cost is emotional exhaustion, anxiety, and the sense of being used. Nobody likes the sense of being used. That was Joey Drew Studios' dynamic, exactly, but it would get heightened by the horror of ink and demons. What makes Joey's archetype even more so dangerous is that it never truly feels satisfied. Oh, it is never enough for them. It turns into a dark cycle. The ravenous hunger for validation is constant, and because it is never met for them, the cycle of exploitation continues to repeat. People like Joey drain others, sure, for malicious reasons sometimes, but I think it's mostly because they believe that their legacy or recognition will finally quiet the emptiness inside. They think that once they get what they want, once they get the legacy or recognition, the voices in their head will say that it's enough, that they will stop yelling at them to give more and do more. It is that belief which keeps them locked in that loop of building, consuming, and collapsing. And the ink machine becomes the perfect metaphor for this archetype. Joey and the machine reflect the same psychological truth, that when a person tries to defeat their own insecurity by controlling everything around them, the outcome is instability and ruin. To further this, let's look at compensatory control theory, which explains that when people feel powerless or vulnerable, they try to impose strict control over their environment to restore a sense of order. Remember, at some point, Joey Drew Studios was facing its own financial downfall, and this must have driven Joey mad and spiraled him into a deeper desperation to control. He was terrified, so he terrorized. This manifested in controlling his employees' creations and even reality itself through the machine. I wonder what kind of childhood Joey had. Did he not have his internal needs met? I personally always tie everything back down to the foundational level, to when people were kids. By the end of his life, Joey was alone. The empire he built collapsed, and all he had was a small apartment filled with regrets. His story, despite it being eventful, was ultimately still empty. Joey's constant life draining of others and self-centered ambition hollowed him out until there was no genuine connection remaining, bar some pity letters that he would receive from his ex-employees. Yep, not family, not friends, just the people who used to work for him, now all off living their own lives with their own families and their own friends. Joey Drew is the ink machine, a whirlpool of a need for admiration, an uncontrollable urge for exploitation, and a fear of death that can never be quelled.